bike. This is a 200cc Royal brand motorcycle that we purchased in Accra for about $900 plus $100 in registration and insurance. And I just want to point out a couple of features of the bike for people who are asking about that online. So up front on the bike, we've got a front disc brake here, pretty simple. And this is the suspension on the front. Suspension is a little squishy, and there's no adjustment for rebound or compression or anything like that, but it works. We just have to go a little easier when we're in big whoops or really rough terrain. The tires that came with it are essentially off-road tires. They're not full-on knobbies, but they're perfect for the mix of riding that we've been doing. And when we get into deep sand and softer off-road terrain, we've been letting the air pressure out, which makes a huge difference. And then of course we can reinflate them when we get back on the road. It's got a horn, it's got a one-cylinder 200cc engine here. Thing feels real solid. It's not super powerful. It's a little bit like riding a typical 250cc four-stroke dirt bike in the US. With all of our luggage and stuff, yeah, they don't go real fast on the hills, but we've been able to maintain speeds of 55 or 60 miles an hour real comfortably without feeling like we're taxing the motors too hard. They have 5 gears. Rear brake is right where you'd expect it to be. Here's the airbox. When we got these bikes, they had a lot of plastics covering everything. We removed the plastics mainly because we plan to sell the bikes at the end, and so we wanted them to be in good condition when we get back. Gas tank is I think about 3.5 gallons, which we figured is getting us about a 240-mile range. So we've had no issues with gas. We haven't had to carry extra gas. Every fill up, we've been able to find stations real regularly, and so the range on these things has been really impressive. You can see I've got my Nomad, this is a Dakine Nomad mountain biking backpack that I've rigged as a tank bag here. I have a strap going around the front of the neck, and then I just made a couple webbing loops here, and I used the straps which are designed for carrying mountain bike body armor to connect it to these loops, tighten them down. It works great as a tank bag. I've got my camera in the beaver tail here, so it's on quick draw, and then some other essential stuff up in the bag. On the back, we've got a real simple rear drum brake here, and just super simple. There's a chain adjustment. Let's see what else. We got passenger foot pegs. These have been real handy for connecting the Reckless 80 bags. Here's the exhaust. I've got an exhaust heat shield rigged up on here. There was a plastic heat shield that came with the bike, but I felt that those weren't necessarily sturdy enough for supporting the weight of the Reckless riding off-road, so I've got our own Mosko heat shield rigged on here, and that's worked out great. Back of the bike, brake light, blinkers, license plate. Here is the chain. The chain I've ridden this about 1,500 kilometers so far. The chain came real loose and was actually starting to skip, so I tightened that up quite a bit, and I'm expecting it to stretch a little more. Chain guards, rear pegs. Here on this side, you can see the battery that came with the bike, and this again had a cover on it. I removed it. I might consider leaving that on for a future trip just so this is all protected. I put a couple zip ties here just to keep the cables from catching on trees and branches and stuff when we go by. The gear shifter. These bikes, unlike the bikes we ride at home, which are usually 1 down and 4 up, these are 5 down. So it's got a heel part to the lever and a toe part to the lever. I never use the heel part, but it does take a while to get adjusted. So instead of neutral being between first and second, it's basically you just go straight down 5, and I'm constantly forgetting to do that and switching it the wrong way. But anyway, it works. Here's the other side of the motor, fuel petcock, and then of course on the front, the brakes and suspension again from this side. We had an issue with the front rotor coming a bit loose and making some noise, so we stopped at a mechanic shop and they put some shims in here that's holding it on there quite a bit tighter now, and that noise has gone away. Also on the fuel petcock on Josh's bike, there's a weld where the fuel petcock connects to the tank. That weld, right from day one, had a small drip leak in it, so we took that into a shop and had them re-weld it. They had us back on the road in less than an hour. It was a really fast, easy fix. So far, that's the only mechanical issue we've experienced with the bike. Carburetor, there's a choke here on the inside. We haven't really had to use the chokes. It's so warm here. The bikes have started right up. On top, we've got the controls. We've got a speedometer. There's no tachometer. We do have a fuel gauge. neutral lights, stuff like that. The locking mechanism is sort of interesting on these bikes. You can lock the steering, and then there's also a special key shape here which protects the lock from tampering. So when I turn this, you can see that it's not possible to get a key in there. And then in addition to that, we've got an alarm on the bike. So when the alarm is set, if somebody shakes the bike, it makes a bunch of noise. So that's kind of handy if we're in a bar or something like that. We can find out if somebody's been messing with the bikes. And then on the back here, you can see how the Reckless 80 rigs up really naturally. It's just connected down to the passenger foot pegs. Got my rear duffel here, 10 poles, document pocket. This has come really in handy when we're at borders because we keep our passports and our bike documentation and stuff in there. So when we get to the border, rip this off, go into one of the customs offices, come back out, reattach it, and then we can go to the next customs office and deal with our business there and so on and so forth. But when the beaver tail is actually closed, the documents are in a totally secure, protected position where somebody can't just grab them. 10 poles. I've got tools on the back on one side. I've got a bottle of water in the back on the other side. So those are both on quick draw. If we get a flat tire, have to do some field repairs. Josh is carrying some emergency water. So between the two of us, we're carrying a little over 5 liters of water. Then my other Molly pouches on the front and up here on the back are filled with emergency food and snacks and things like that in case we break down or end up camping without anticipating it. So that's basically how I've got the bike set up. This has been a really good kit so far. The bikes have been charging. They're real strong runners, and here 200 cc's is actually considered a pretty big bike. So a lot of people compliment us on how large and strong the bikes are, even though back home that would be obviously a pretty small motorcycle. So that's where we are so far. There's an update from Bagu, Togo.